Thank you, Ceann Comhairle. Taoiseach, for some time we have, and particularly Deputy Lisa Chambers, have been raising the crisis in our defence forces at all ranks and levels, with you and with the government. The crisis in morale, in retention of specialist personnel, in pay and conditions, in retention of members generally, in health and safety, but to no avail. It is fair to say that the government's collective head is in the sands in relation to this crisis and this issue. Researchers at the University of Limerick, in an unprecedented piece of work, interviewing and gaining observations from over 600 serving personnel, reveal a shocking story of neglect of our defence forces, which underpins our very democracy. There is near unanimous agreement across all ranks and age profiles that the defence forces made up of the Army, Naval Service and Air Corps are now at risk, that all three arms are now at risk. Some officers have told how they are kept awake at night by concerns about whether work carried out on aircraft in the Air Corps leaves them safe for flying because so many experienced personnel have left. To quote, "There is going to be a huge safety issue in the Air Corps," said one officer. The Defence Forces has been turned into a job bridge, another member said, referring to pay and conditions. Some chaplains have said that they've given up encouraging people to stay in the uniform. A number of privates spoke of struggling to survive, often depending on their parents. And I'll give some quotations from the research. "People have to leave to survive. I can't get a mortgage. Some members are even on family income supplement. People sleeping in cars. At some point, someone has to say, this is unacceptable." On health and safety, a quotation, "We are already seeing it in the Army. Little accidents. There's going to be a big accident," said one senior officer, citing absence of middle management as a significant cause. "It's going to come. If it keeps on unravelling, it will come. We fear a serious incident with a number of people, a number of deaths. It could be overseas." In the Air Corps, we have seen that already with 3 or 4 fatal accidents. Air Corps ground crews working too many hours. In the Navy, there's not enough to manage 7 ships, never mind 8. Women returning from maternity leave feel they're discriminated against, often paraded, and people feel under no circumstances can they access mental health services or admit that they're facing stress or any such issue. Please. The fundamental question I'm going to put to you, Taoiseach, do you accept that there is a deep crisis within our defence forces? Does government accept that? A crisis that calls for an exceptional response. Are you particularly satisfied re health and safety issues, particularly in our Air Corps? And can you confirm that? And when will somebody in government shout stop to this ongoing decline?
Taoiseach, please.
Thanks very much. Well, first of all, on behalf of the government, I want to once again express our very strong support for our defence forces, for our Army, our Navy and our Air Corps, and also to say that the government is very proud of the role that our defence forces play, whether it's around the world in missions such as Mali, which I discussed with President Macron yesterday, in Lebanon, whether it's the role that they played last week in helping the civil power to deal with the effects of Storm Ophelia, or whether it's the role they play in so many different ceremonies, including those of 2016 last year. So we very much support, value and respect our defence forces. Recruitment is underway, as you know. Very successful recruitment is currently underway to bring an extra 800 people, or to bring at least 800 replacements into the defence forces. Recruitment was never halted, even during the recession, unlike in other areas. And also the budget for the Defence Force has been increased next year, which is hugely significant. In terms of difficulty recruiting people in particular areas, in particular aspects of the Defence Forces, we accept that is an issue. It's certainly an issue in the Air Corps, where pilots and air traffic controllers can be paid much more to work in the same job in the private sector. and that is now occurring not just in the Defence Forces but in other parts of the public service. It's not universally the case across the public service, but is the case in some parts of the public service for some roles, including some roles in the Defence Forces. So what are we doing about it? Two things. First of all, public sector pay restoration is underway. This is happening across the public sector. We agreed only a few weeks ago with the trade unions an extension to the Lansdowne Road Agreement, which provides for 2 pay increases next year and provides for full pay restoration for over 90% of public servants within the next couple of years. So very much reversing the pay cuts which are a feature of your period in government and then continued into the early years of the last government, those very much being reversed now. In terms of some of the new recruits, pay restoration in the region of €5,000 a year, which is very significant. When it comes to particular areas within particular parts of the public service where we have a difficulty recruiting people and retaining people because the private sector is paying better, Cabinet last week, in fact Cabinet this week, actually, I think it was actually last week, Cabinet decided specifically to refer those issues for a detailed study to the Public Service Pay Commission. Some of those areas in health and some of those areas in the Defence Forces where we have particular difficulties in particular professions, recruiting people and retaining people. And we look forward to the report of that commission because they will look at it objectively. They will study what the reasons are for difficulty in recruitment and retention, where it is a feature and where it isn't a feature within particular branches of the public service, and what could be done about it, because it isn't all about pay, as you know. It can often be about other issues, and we very much look forward to having that report and being able to act on it.
Okay, Deputy Martin.
Taoiseach, I asked you a very simple question. Do you accept that there is a deep crisis within our defence forces? Yes or no? Your reply doesn't tally with the testimony of over 600 personnel in an unprecedented piece of research with the University of Limerick. There have been other supporting evidence in relation to this crisis. I also asked you, were you satisfied in relation to the health and safety aspects of people working in the Army, and particularly in the Air Corps, Taoiseach? I instanced to you there some quotations from the research in relation to genuine fears and concerns about the capacity of the Air Corps and safety issues within the Air Corps. And I asked you very simply, are you satisfied in terms of health and safety within the Air Corps? And you failed to reference the shocking failure of retention within the Army. Recruitment comes in, people are flooding out of the Army. And I would reference you to Senator Gerard Crockwell's contribution to the Seanad yesterday, a man who knows a thing or two about the Army, he having served there before.
Thank you, Deputy.
And what he said is, never in his experience has the Army, Navy and Air Corps been neglected so much corporately by government, and never has it been at such a lower ebb than it currently is.
Thank you, Deputy. Time is up.
And we really don't need the kind of typical responses that we get. What people are looking for out there, the wives of Army personnel, those who have traditionally been associated with the Army, they want some sense of acknowledgement of their plight, of their crisis. And we've been raising this now for well over a year, and there's no sense of that coming from government at all.
Taoiseach.
To answer your questions, Deputy, deep crisis, no, but real substantive issues that need to be dealt with, absolutely. We absolutely accept that there are issues around recruitment and retention in particular parts of the public service, including the Air Corps. In terms of the health and safety, the Minister for Defence has received an assurance from the GOC of the Air Corps that any issues around health and safety will be dealt with, and we have no specific concerns, therefore, in relation to health and safety. Minister Keogh will meet the representative associations to discuss the findings of this particular report, and I think it's important to say that since the report was compiled, PD Fora has signed up to the Lansdowne Road Agreement. They did that in March. That was after the report was compiled, and that allowed for the commencement of pay increases and the payment in arrears to their members. And these improved pay scales have now been implemented and have been backdated to the 1st of July. And also Minister Keogh will attend the RACO conference in the next week or so. I think it's also worth mentioning the kind of investment that is now going into the Defence Forces.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
There's a capital allocation of €406 million for the next 6 years, which is very significant. That's €250 million for new naval service ships, replacing existing vessels, €55 million for armoured personnel carriers. It's a programme over 5 or 6 years. A Cessna aircraft replacement programme, the tender for that is ongoing, and €11 million to purchase armoured utility and armoured logistics vehicles, and also €5 million for replacement Pilatus aircraft. In terms of barracks, €33 million of projects are now at various stages of construction, including €3 million to upgrade the accommodation in the Curragh, locker block refurbishment at Cahillbrew in Dublin at a cost of €3.8 million, and an upgrade in costume barracks in Athlone of €2.7 million. So I think that, by any measure, is a significant capital investment programme in the years ahead.
Thank you, Taoiseach.